We're going to start with the Eagles, man, because you and I we've been sitting here and we've been thinking of what we can do on the morning show. And besides just reading the notes, right? Besides just going over what's happening in training camp. Oh, Jalen Hurts looked great this day. This person struggled that day. That's too boring for me because there's too many practices. There's going to be ups and downs throughout this summer. We have over a month before the regular season starts. So how can we translate what's going on right now in training camp to meaningful football? So the first segment we're going to start with today is who are your top 5 most important Eagles heading into this season? We were thinking about doing a list without Jalen Hurts because that's the obvious, right? But we're going to include him just because you have to, and we want to talk a little bit about Jalen Hurts. So we'll start with number 1 because I think that's the easiest route to go. Yeah. And that's the consensus, at least for me. Who knows if you have someone else, knock on wood, but I do have Jalen Hurts at number 1. It's the obvious answer. You could say that for every team in the National Football League, right? If my quarterback goes down, we're screwed. But it does get lost with this roster because so many people last year, outside of Eagles fans looking in, say that he took this leap because of the roster and because of AJ Brown and because of this acquisition and that acquisition, and you lose focus on what he provides this offense. We saw what a pocket quarterback can look like in this offense with Gardner Minshew. Now, he's not the greatest pocket quarterback, but he is serviceable as a backup in his tenure in the NFL, and he came in and went 0-2. He lost to Andy Dalton and the Saints at home. Jalen Hurts, obviously, is the most important piece to this season. He has to stay on the field, and he has to at least stay steady Eddie with where he was last year. There's not going to be a decline, but I'm going to say there cannot be a decline because that would obviously hurt the Eagles' chances of getting back to where they want to be in the Super Bowl. So Jalen Hurts is the most important Eagle. I'll throw it to you, and then we can move on because that should be everybody's number 1.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is the guy here at number 1. You hit the nail on the head there. And, like you said, with Gardner Minshew, you got a short preview towards the end of last season of what that looks like with a guy that can't do what Jalen Hurts can do with his legs. And you see how important that is to guys like Nick Sirianni, right? When he's creating the game plan for this offense. So you even see it so far to the point where the Eagles, they go out and they get a quarterback that's more similar to Jalen Hurts and Marcus Mariota, who can use his legs, right? Maybe doesn't have the arm talent or the accuracy that a Gardner Minshew has, but he is able to use his legs and get out of the pocket. So you see that they want to keep the offense, even if Jalen Hurts somehow does miss some time, they want to keep it flowing the same way. But the simple truth, this guy's an MVP candidate last year, and without your MVP candidate, you're just simply not as good, and you're not an elite contender, and that's what it comes down to with Jalen Hurts. And on top of that, Marcus Mariota from the reports has sounded like he's been terrible at camp. So, so we're not in a position where, Gardner Minshew, maybe he can win you a game, right? Marcus Mariota, I don't know, and I'm not sure that I want to see that. So, Jalen Hurts by far the most important guy on this team. And what I would say, as long as we don't get, weathered by injuries, if you have Jalen Hurts, you're going to have a chance to win a lot of games. So,
absolutely.
Jalen Hurts.
I mean, the man lost 1 game as a starter. Outside the Super Bowl, he lost 1 game as a starter.
Yeah, and in the Super Bowl he loses. He, throws for over 300
breaks records,
yards and runs
everything.
for touchdowns.
Like I said, we're not breaking news here for, I would say, if not 100%, 99.999% of teams and fans across the league for their respective teams would say that, their quarterback is the number 1 most important player on their team. But to all your points, like we said, it gets lost with Jalen a little bit because I don't feel like he has all of the respect from the outside looking in.
Yeah,
because I see a lot of clips on TikTok. I see a lot of other content creators from other fan bases that just hone in on this roster, right? Remember what Daniel Jones could do with this roster, Scotty? Remember all those people, right? Remember Brock Purdy could do things with this roster. That. Like that's why we had to at least hit on Jalen more than just glossing over him, because it's clear to us and it's clear to most people, but there are still some people out there that say, X, Y, and Z quarterback who are bottom 10 in the league could perform well with this roster, and you miss what he provides to this team, both with his arm and with his legs, right? So Jalen Hurts, number one most important Eagle heading into the 2023 season. Number two, I got to go with the right tackle. I got to go with my man Lane Johnson, man. And it's pretty simple. It's the resume. It's the track record of what's there and what's been proven without Lane Johnson on the field.
Yeah.
The winning is affected by Lane Johnson being on or off the field. The quarterback play. Lane Johnson hasn't allowed a sack in how many seasons? 3? Just over.
I want to say at least the last 2 seasons. Yeah.
It's been a while since Lane Johnson has allowed a sack. It's been a while since Lane Johnson might have allowed a quarterback pressure, right? But it's just as simple as they win when Lane Johnson's on the field, and they struggle and lose when Lane Johnson's off the field. So he is my number 2 most important. Like we said, Jalen is an MVP type quarterback, right? So he goes number 1. Lane Johnson is the best right tackle in the game for my money. So that's why he slides in at number 2.
Yeah, no, Lane Johnson is number 2. Yeah, Lane Johnson is number 2 for me as well. And we've seen this even dating back to the Carson Wentz days of how much this team hurts when Lane Johnson is out. It just leaves a gaping hole in the QB's backside, and you never want to see that, right? So, or actually, I should say the QB's strong side. So when you're looking at like the edges that you have to go against on the right side as well, he's always facing the top tier edge rushers of the world. So he's your protector on the right side. He's that leader. He's that caterpillar, right? That anchor of the offensive line. And I went ahead and I looked up some stats just without Lane Johnson. So the Eagles are 13-22 all time when Lane Johnson misses games. So a losing record, and they're actually losing by 9-game disparity there. So it's a pretty significant losing record. Jalen Hurts without Lane Johnson, 76.5 passer rating, 1,972 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 12 games. So the numbers aren't great when Lane Johnson isn't there as well for Jalen Hurts.
Nothing's great when Lane's off the field.
That is in your face when Lane Johnson is not there. So he is a key piece to this team. And we've seen it firsthand how significant it is when he's off the field. And we see how significant it is when he's on the field in
Correct.
the playoffs when he's playing with a torn abductor or whatever that was in his stomach. And he's still a top tier right tackle, still not giving up sacks or QB hits, even with the injuries to his midsection. So this dude's a beast. And I'm just counting, I'm hoping. We know that Jason Kelce's retirement's around the corner. Lane Johnson has been through a lot in his career. He's been around for a while, and I'm just hoping that he's sticking around for at least 1, 2, 3 more years, man. Because Jason Kelce's a huge part, and I'm not speaking. I don't want to sit here and like compare him, but Lane Johnson's first on this list before Jason Kelce is on this list.
Oh, absolutely.
So what does that speak to? Does that mean he's more important to the offensive line? I'm not going to have this battle and discuss and argue that point.
No, I'll answer your question for you. Yes, he's more important to this offensive line. It's just the God's honest truth. Think about where more pressure and different things happen off the edges, right? If Jason Kelce goes down, we do not want to see that. But if he goes down, Cam Jurgens will slide over to center, and then somebody like a Tyler Steen or somebody else will fill in at that guard position. And then you're talking interior pressure where it's easier for Jalen to escape the pockets. It's easier for him to see coming and read and everything like that. You lose Lane Johnson. Again, the numbers are there, man. It's not like Jason Kelce's a warrior, but he has missed a little bit of time in an Eagles uniform, right? And it just, the numbers aren't the same. Lane Johnson is better at his position. Lane Johnson affects this team more, and he affects winning more. And it's the disparity. Like I said, it's the drop-off. Listen, Jason Kelce, to me, is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is one of the best centers to ever play this game. I think he's still one of the top centers, top 2 centers in the league right now. But to me, the drop off from him to what we're expecting Cam Jurgens to be is not nearly as steep as Lane Johnson to back up, whether that's Dennis
Yeah.
Kelly, whether that's Jack Driscoll, whoever it is,
Yeah.
the drop ball from Lane to that person is huge compared to what Kelsey to Cam Jurgens would be at center in front of Jalen Hurts.
Absolutely. That's the biggest difference, is that you do
And
have a direct
this is a great
replacement.
point by Brett. He does run the offensive line.
Yeah.
Again, it's just what I've heard from Cam Jurgens is I think he would be able to step in more seamlessly at center than the backup right tackle would, and I think it'll affect winning more with Lane, right?
Yeah.
So Jalen number 1, Lane Johnson number 2. The third most important player heading into this Eagles season, I have Hassan Reddick. Now, hear me out. I know this sounds crazy because we're talking about the deepest position group that this team has, right? We're talking about the deepest rotation, and we know what they do with these edge rushers. But to me, Scotty, this defensive line, those sack totals, Doug, because he had 16, 17 last year. This defensive line isn't that without Hassan Reddick. And if you take him off the field for an extended period of time, if he goes down, I think you're in a little bit of trouble. I love what I'm hearing and seeing out of Nolan Smith. I get the comparisons. I get the size, right? But he's an unknown. He's a rookie. Jalen Carter. We have all these expectations for Jalen Carter, but at the moment, he's an unknown. He's a rookie. Never played a snap yet. Jordan Davis, not a pass rusher. Yeah. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, another year older. This pass rush that was so lethal last year that we're expecting to be back at the same level this year under Sean Desai will not be the same without Hassan Reddick. And I think this defense could get torn up a little bit with, not torn up, but I think this defense could get beat up a little bit without Hassan Reddick on the field.
Yeah, I actually like that pick. I don't have him on my list here, but that is definitely kind of an out-of-the-box pick. And I see what you mean, because when you're looking at Hassan Reddick, when you're looking at this defensive line as a whole, who is the guy that strikes fear into the quarterback?
Right.
And that is Hassan Reddick. And outside of that, you don't really have any, I don't want to disrespect the guys like Josh Sweat. These guys do it as a community, as a tandem, right? Like everything else outside of Javon Hargrave and even Hassan Reddick last year, 2 guys that got double-digit sacks, of course. You have the rest of the defensive line that just kind of come together to make the rest of that unit. Josh Sweat was amazing last year, but he's not Hassan Reddick. It's different. It's just a different style of pass rush. It's a different approach. I think the quickness that Hassan Reddick gets to the quarterback is the biggest difference between him and any other player on this defense, because he can shut plays down before the quarterback even gets to look down the field, and that's a huge part of the game. So, I think that's a great pick, honestly, here at number 3. Number 3 for me, I did go with Jason Kelsey, right up next on the offensive line. The big thing for me here, obviously the leadership from Kelsey. It's the reason that you don't want him to retire each and every year, even with Cam Jurgens still there, as promising as Jurgens looks. So you don't want to lose that leader, that link, that connection on your offensive line with Jason Kelsey. But on top of that, at this point, the way it's sounding with Cam Jurgens potentially starting at right guard, it now makes it even more important that Jason Kelsey stays put in that center position, because you don't want to have to move second-year Cam Jurgens all around the offensive line, shift him in and out, put him at right guard, and then move him to center, right? Learn that position again and play there. Now, do I think that Cam Jurgens couldn't do it? No, I think he could do it. I think he could do it successfully as far as transitioning from right guard to center. I think they're still going to be practicing him in that role, I'm sure, just because he's going to be the second center in the depth chart, right? But looking at just the hole that it would create at the right guard spot, because now you're sliding in another non-starter into that offensive line and figuring out something new. So just looking at the hole that it leaves with Jason Kelsey, the leadership, the experience that he brings in the huddle. Are you able to do the QB sneaks, right? Like, I know that was the big thing this offseason. Are you able to do those QB sneaks without that hog in the middle and Jason Kelsey that just stuffs everything up, pushes the pile forward? So Jason Kelsey, maybe it's more of an aura type of thing with him.
I think,
just having him on the field, right? That Mr. Reliable type of situation.
I think it is.
But yeah.
And here's why I think it is. So preview here, right? Spoiler. I don't have Jason Kelce on my list.
Fair enough.
And I know that sounds effing bonkers, right? And it probably sounds nuts to Brett.
There's a lot of important people in
I
this
still
team,
think,
though.
like I said, dude, I still think if he's not the best center in the league still, even at this point of his career, he's still top 2, top 3 center, right? You're the kid in Kansas City, whatever. My thing is every year, every offseason, we're kind of hanging on to see what he's going to do for the last 2 seasons. Is he coming back for another year or not? And Howie has already kind of planned for the future there with Cam Jurgens. Now, I get your point. He's slotted to start at guard. That could create an issue there if Kelce goes down. But in terms of that center spot specifically, I think they're already okay at that position if he is to go down. Is Cam Jurgens Jason Kelce? Hell no, that's not what I'm saying. But I think they're okay enough because that's the plan anyway. If he doesn't come back this year, Cam Jurgens, your starting center.
Yeah.
And to Brett's point, I love Jason Kelce, man. But if he doesn't come back and they're rolling with Cam Jurgens, they're not a 4-14 team heading into the season.
Yeah.
So if they lose Jason Kelce, they're not going to be a 4-14 team for my money. So I think he's important. I think he's top 10 most important. I think he's still a top 2 center in this league. He might be my outside of Jalen Hurts, he might be my favorite my favorite Eagle. But I just don't have him on my list. At number 4, this one's interesting because I narrowed it down to 2 position groups here, and they're very similar. Wide receiver, corner. And I was leaning corner at first because you and I have had this conversation. If Slay or Bradbury goes down, what's going to happen? But I'm reading the tea leaves, and I'm seeing reports come out of camp about Kelly Ringo. Yeah. And you brought in Greedy Williams, who's still a young, lengthy corner coming over from Cleveland. I think they're serviceable enough. You still have Avonte Maddox, who we know is a slot guy, but you can do different things. Yeah. I think they're serviceable enough at corner if one of those 2 were to go down to stay competitive. If A.J. Brown goes down, you could say the same for Devontae Smith, but I'm going to go with A.J. Brown at my number 4. If he goes down and Smitty has to slide up to your number 1, the drop-off in talent in that wide receiver room is much more drastic to me than the drop-off at the cornerback room. And I think we saw last year just how important A.J. Brown is to this offense and how important he is to Jalen Hurts himself. And I think it's important for them to take another step and grow together on the field, not just off the field as their best friends, right? What do you have? 1,500 yards, almost 1,500 yards last year. Double-digit touchdowns. He was ridiculous in year 1. Maybe the production, statistically wise, goes down a bit because, they're going to share the ball. They have all these running backs, everything. Yeah. But I think A.J. Brown is crucial just as a pure threat on the field for this offense.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I don't have him at number 4, but nonetheless, I'll talk about A.J. Brown when I get to him, right? Yeah. He's number 5 for me. But number 4 for me on the most important Eagles list is actually going to be to the first group that you referred to there, and that was the cornerback group.
All right.
But I'm going to go in a different direction, and I'm going to go with Avonte Maddox. Because, that slot corner position, we saw how important that was down the stretch when Avonte Maddox missed some time towards the end of the season. And when you look in division specifically, who's your biggest test, right? It's the Dallas Cowboys. And when you look at the difference of having Avonte Maddox versus CeeDee Lamb in the slot versus anybody else on this roster, Josiah Scott, whoever the hell you want to throw in that slot position to go against those slot wide receivers. And you saw these teams, they started putting guys in the slot just so they wouldn't have to challenge Slay and Bradbury. And that's what we're going to see a lot of this year. I even think to the Kansas City Chiefs and Travis Kelce. Who the hell is guarding Travis Kelce when he's lined up at tight end or in the slot? I mean, it's Avonte Maddox, especially with no CGJ on this roster anymore. I think Avonte Maddox's role is even more important. Now, to your point, they're a lot deeper at corner than what they've really honestly been in the last couple of years.
On paper.
On paper. That's a good point to throw in there because there's some question marks. I mean, Kelly Ringo, like you said, he sounds great in camp. He sounds like he's the next coming for that starting outside corner. And Maybe that means that he would be fine in the slot if he had to slide in there. Who knows? But right now, for my money, I would take Avonte Maddox as the number 4 most important player, and it's just the role that he plays. Because when that slot receiver is open, when that middle of the field is
Yeah, man.
open, that's a scary. Those are scary hours for a defense,
Oh, yeah.
right? And our linebackers aren't the greatest, right? Like we don't know what those are question
And
marks
right now,
too.
our safeties aren't the greatest.
Who are the linebackers and safeties that are going to
Yeah.
guard these slot receivers, these tight ends? So I'm going to go with Avonte Maddox, man.
That
We
is,
saw the drop off firsthand last season when he missed some time.
man, that is sneakily probably the best pick of the list. I didn't even think about going
Cowboys
there.
torched us, man. CeeDee Lamb torched us.
Listen, everyone will. And I think to your point, Avonte Maddox is a perfect person for this list because it's been what I've been talking about drop off from that guy
Yeah.
to what's up next. And you don't think about slot corner specifically, but like you said, who's filling that role? Because Greedy Williams, to my memory, isn't a slot corner.
Outside, yeah.
Kelly Ringo, but I don't think you're throwing him in at slot corner to debut.
Yeah, he's lengthy.
You're looking at a Josh Joby, a Josiah Scott, something like that. And that is a huge drop off. Again, we've seen it time and time again. Out of the CB room, Avonte Maddox has been the most injury prone every season. So we have lived life without him. We've survived, but it's been ugly when he's off the field. So to your point, I think that's a position where they can survive without him regular season. I think in a postseason matchup, if he's out, that could hurt, man, depending on who a San Francisco 49ers team.
Debo, man. CMC lining up against Josiah Scott.
There could be a lot of issues there, man. So great pick. At number 5, obviously, I know you have A.J. Brown. So I'll let you go first. A.J. Brown's your number 5.
Just to continue your point off of A.J. Brown, his importance to the offense. He is the main target on this offense. He's Jalen Hurts' best friend. So there's a lot that ties in there. And I do, even to your point earlier, I know you said you lose Smitty and there's a drop-off too, and I agree with that. But I think A.J. is even more important just from
and he's the better receiver, right?
Yeah, I don't know yet. You know what I mean? Like, he is the better receiver.
Well, listen, we ranked him 7 and 6 on our list, and Smitty wasn't top 10.
Yeah, so we're high on Smitty though, right? Like we know the potential is there that he could be a wide receiver 1 on his own team.
Sure.
But AJ is that guy for this team right now. And to your point, he is the most important focal point of this offense because of the attention that it takes. I'm just thinking about those drags, right? When they bring him in motion before the play starts.
Everything, man.
Just everything. Those are automatic first downs. The slants through the middle, those are automatic first downs. But then he also takes the top off the defense as well with the deep ball. So he covers a lot of the bases for the Eagles.
I think all three levels of the field, more so than any other wide receiver does.
6th in yards after catch last season as well. Just speaks to the slants, the screens, what he can do once the ball is in his hands. So yeah, A.J. Brown at number 5 for me. And to your point, very important part of this offense.
Yeah, I just think he affects all 3 levels of the field more so than a Devontae Smith does right now, right?
Exactly.
You go to week 1 last year where he was just like slant boy, right? He was Michael Thomas 2.0 in week 1. It was slant, yard after the catch, ate them up, right? Over 140 yards, whatever. You can go to when he played with Gardner Minshew against the Saints and he had a season-long 78-yard touchdown on a go route down the sideline. Ran a double move and a go route against Trevon Diggs and the Dallas Cowboys with Gardner Minshew, right? So, and then we know what he can do in the intermediate on a post, on an out, anything. You can use him in the slot. You can use him outside. You can put him in motion. You can use him as a decoy. His physicality, his size, his hands. You talked about the Pittsburgh game earlier, the Tennessee. He affects so much. And even the games where he has 4 catches for 58 yards and no touchdowns, if I would bet money, I didn't go back and do the research, but I would bet money those games would be kind of like Washington when Devontae Smith had 156 yards in the first half. Now, why is Devontae Smith able to get 156 yards and 7 catches?
Because A.J. Brown's on the other side.
Because he's great, but also because A.J. Brown's on the field across from him.
Yeah.
He affects so much, even if he's not the target, right? So that's why I think he's on this list more so than anything. At number 5, this one's tough because he's not a better player than Jason Kelce. He's not a better player than one of the corners, right? He might not be a better player at his position than Devontae Smith is. But I'm going to go to the opposite tackle of Lane Johnson, and I'm going to go with Jordan Mailata at number 5 because I value tackles that much, especially on this offense, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, if Lane goes down, if a guard goes down, it's so much easier for Jalen to read and see interior pressure.
Yeah.
When you're talking about missing Lane and what that can affect with Jalen having to then climb the pocket, if Mailata or Lane go down, I'm talking about Mailata here, and that's his blind side especially. If he can't see that, if he's forced to move the pocket, he has to climb it then if the pressure's coming from the outside. If the pressure's coming from up the middle, that allows Jalen to utilize his legs, get outside the pocket. And that's something not a lot of defenses want to do. They want to bring the pressure from outside, trap him, and make him climb, right? Which I'm not saying he can't do, but he's definitely more effective getting outside the pocket and rolling, right? So to me, if you lose Jordan Mailata, again, the drop-off. The backup tackles on this team are not, at least with the guards. Yeah, I know Tyler Steen hasn't had a great camp so far, but you do have Tyler Steen, who was drafted highly, right, and thought highly of. You do have Sua Opeta. You do have Josh Sills, who was Jack Driscoll can play both, right? You have more options at guard to where, again, we're talking Dennis Kelly. We're talking Roderick Johnson and Fred Johnson are second and third at left tackle behind Jordan Mailata right now. Brett Toth, like Brett said, there's a lot of names right now that I don't want to see on the Eagles football field this year.
Yeah.
So I think Jordan Mailata is very, very important, not for just the talent perspective, but what that hole would provide, man.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. And you think back in the day, you know, your long-standing left tackle, and it was always Jason Peters, right?
Right.
He was that guy protecting the backside of the quarterback in Philadelphia, and he's gone now. And Jordan Mailata's been the guy that's been able to step into his shoes and completely fulfill the role. And I think to your point, you made all great points. I'll just add another one on there. You know, who's the first guy that steps up for Jalen Hurts whenever there's any type of cheap shot or any type of questionable play? You know, somebody diving at his legs or hitting him up top after the
new bodyguard.
He's literally the bodyguard for this guy. And I know Lane Johnson, he's super important, but Jordan Mailata is the guy that's always there, right? And to that point, it's extremely important for I feel for Jalen Hurts to see him there. And I think that goes for Lane Johnson as well, right? Like just having your tackles there and having the confidence to do whatever you need to do without worrying about them breaking down. And I think just having that security of having Mailata on his backside, knowing that he's there and that he's going to do everything in his power to protect him, I think that just makes a huge difference from a confidence perspective for your quarterback.
And think about competition, right? You mentioned with Avonte Maddox in division, whatever, in the postseason, who's going to be lining up against him in the slot, or Josiah Scott if Avonte Maddox is out. Where's all the premier pass rushers come from?
Yeah.
The edge.
Coming from the edge. Exactly.
Right. Outside of what? Chris Jones and Aaron Donald.
That's the thing, Dylan. You made me think of it, and it's kind of an obvious point. I don't know why I didn't think of it before, but thank you. Nonetheless, if you don't have one of your tackles there, then guess what the Cowboys are going to do? They're going to move Micah Parsons over to that side where your strong tackle is.
That's going to be a long 60 minutes.
So it's important to have both of those tackles there so that you don't have a weak side of your offensive line. And so that's exactly what you reminded me of there with when you're talking about edge rushers, because the Niners can do it. They can put Bosa on the other side. All the premier teams can do that and switch their pass rusher to the opposite side and let them go off. So
and think about some of the defenses that are lined up on the schedule, man. You play the Cowboys twice, we know that. You play the Giants twice, right? Yeah. You're going to play the Chiefs, you're going to play the Niners, you're going to play the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets. These teams have guys that can get after the quarterback, man, and off the edge. So I do, man. It's very interesting. The bottom line is you can easily make a top 10 list
Yeah.
Hell, you could maybe make a top like
Yeah.
12 list of most important Eagles this year, because there are a lot that you can make different arguments for as to why they're more important than X, Y, or Z. Right?